Hey, have you been mystified and frustrated by politicians avoiding reality and claiming they can blame innocent people for the slave ownership in which long-dead individuals engaged against other long-dead individuals? Well, California Governor Gavin Newsom appears to want you to shut off your brain, to shut off your ethics, and to shut off your morals, and hop on the anti-virtue crazy train as he and many of his friends in California's government push for a massive so-called reparations program to expand the practice of government enslavement. Hi everyone, I'm Gardner Goldsmith for MRC-TV. You know, many leftist policy positions are so bald-facedly absurd and or grounded in collectivist hypocrisy that they're layups. They're easily refuted, they're easily exposed, and so on. Often, the people pushing them actually expose their own hypocrisy, such as can be seen with Canadian Prime Minister and lockdown Lord of the North Justin Trudeau now doing a 180 and praising Chinese lockdown protesters. Or you can see it in, say, the leftist journal Naomi Klein slamming the Canadian Freedom Convoy participants a year ago, but now praising the Chinese freedom fighters. Yeah, it's awesome, isn't it? It's great. Any sign of a mea culpa? Any hint of trying to set things right with the people that they've defamed, mislabeled, and or work to undermine and arrest in some cases? No. Are there fans at all ready to reassess their devotion to these hypocrites and then maybe reconsider their adherence to these destructive policies on the domestic front in their nations, say Canada or the US? Well, one might think that this would be a layup again, but the answer is no. Most are still buying the hyperbole from the hypocrites. Likewise, one would think that a new political scheme being pushed by California Governor Gavin "Slick" Newsom would be a double easy layup. But despite unconstitutionally locking down businesses and engaging in his own lockdown mask hypocrisy after adopting the false guise of a pandemic paladin for almost 2.5 years, Newsom still is embraced by many of his old fans. And despite its absolutely baseless, immoral, and illogical nature, many of those same people are now applauding his sparkling new push for the absurdity of so-called reparations. Fox News' Timothy Nerozzi reports that the California government could pay each black resident of the state more than $200,000 in what the politicians and their ideological kin are calling reparations. In other words, the governor and his allies want to force taxpayers who never did anything wrong to hand over huge chunks of their earnings to the state, which then will hand that out to people who were never wronged by said taxpayers. This ought to be not just a layup, but to further the basketball parlance, this ought to be so easily refuted it's a slam dunk. Yet it's got a lot of backers, and Newsom is again, well, we'll use basketball parlance, trying to drive this in the media all the way to the hoop. Quote, Newsom has aggressively pushed his plan to provide financial reparations to black Californians, whom he says must be financially compensated for decades of discrimination. The California Reparations Task Force says that under the initiative, qualifying black residents in the state could qualify for $223,200 per person. Really? Upon what is this task force basing its claim of discrimination, as it says, and then calculating the compensation? Not to mention the larger question of how they can prove that already preyed upon taxpayers today are at fault for something that happened so many decades ago. Norozi continues, the task force drew its ballpark number by examining gaps in housing and speculating the approximate amount of wealth lost between 1933 and 1977. The state panel says that Black Californians lost $5,074 per year under previous housing policies. So this is tangentially about slavery and its legacy in what? California government policies regarding housing? And which policies would those be? Perhaps property tax policies that have enslaved people and forced them to cough up money or else they'll lose their houses? Perhaps zoning policies that always restrict the rights of property owners to peacefully use their land and that make it hard for new housing units to be affordable. Would it be that? Or would that be the recent Newsom pushed and passed policy of forcing new homes in California to be fitted with solar panels, which also puts cost burdens on new home construction and limits the amount of new homes for people? Or are they making their claim based on what they might deem insufficient welfarist policies that haven't already taken enough from some people to create low rent or free housing for other people that the government favors? It's evidently all in the interim task force report. And of course, that report itself, all 500 pages of it, well, it's pretty darn ambiguous. But one theme emerges for those who apply a bit of logic to their observations of all of this. And that is the fact that this policy itself is racist. First, it assumes that California residents who are descendants of free or enslaved Black people in the country at the end of the 19th century are all part of one mass, not individuals. As I've noted for MRC-TV, tort law is based on British common law. And according to the common law, a tortious claim for injury is individual specific, person to person. So even if groups of people try to make claims under the class action model that contemporary Western nations have devised, each member of a group or class in a suit must show that he or she belongs in the group being represented. Each must show that he or she has been harmed. Now, being the grandson or nephew of a person who was harmed by slavery, and even being descended from someone who was free at the end of the 19th century, is, under this proposal, a justification to claim specific victim status. Well, I'm sorry, it's not. Moreover, this task force says that it's justified to claim victim status based on the California government's nebulous narrative of insufficient housing for a living Black person or his or her ancestors going back to the late 1800s? Oh, why just that skin color? What about Chinese immigrants? What about folks from Mexico or Hawaii? And that brings us to the second major problem here. Beyond the fact that none of these potential recipients of reparations was injured and therefore cannot be made whole through these fictitiously termed reparations, there's the fact that even if one were to believe that the descendants of slaves deserve to have the state make slaves out of other people today, such as these new slaves, the taxpayers we're talking about, and then that the state will hand over these big sums of cash for things that the taxpayers never did. Well, the history of slavery is such that virtually every individual in any race can claim that at one time or another, his or her ancestors were enslaved or preyed upon. Where does the original sin for slavery actually end? And how do we manage this concept? As Dr. Thomas Sowell has noted, quote, Blacks were not enslaved because they were Black, but because they were available. Slavery has existed in the world for thousands of years. Whites enslaved other whites in Europe for centuries before the first Black was brought to the Western Hemisphere. Asians enslaved Europeans. Asians enslaved other Asians. Africans enslaved other Africans. And indeed, even today in North Africa, blacks continue to enslave blacks. So, regardless of the publicity, regardless of the soft way so many pop media outlets might spin this Newsom scheme, it's absolutely obvious that this is just a redistribution of wealth operation, enslaving some to hand cash to others. In fact, since California is expected to have a return of its massive deficit next year, this slavery will become more evident as newborns arrive into a state where they will be part of a giant government-run plantation, working to pay Newsom and their masters, who already have decided for those little ones that they are the bad guys who harmed others before they were even conceived. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Think about this, the immorality of it. Contemporary slavery. Hey, please join us at Rumble. Remember, Rumble doesn't censor us. We love to see people moving over from YouTube over to Rumble. We'll see you in both conversation sections. Please hit the little plus on Rumble and hit like and subscribe. Make sure you subscribed at YouTube, and we'll see you at MRCTV.org. When you go there, please donate to the Media Research Center. Help keep us running strong into our 36th year fighting the left-wing bias in the media. And of course, we'll see you on the Facebook group. Facebook page is rockin', MRC-TV's Facebook page. We'll see you on Twitter, on TikTok, on Instagram, on Gab. I'm at Gardner Goldsmith, and on Twitter, I'm at Gard Goldsmith. For MRC-TV, I'm Gardner Goldsmith.